Welcome back to the Jewish Roots Life Group, where we have today special guest Joshua Waller from the Isreal guys. He is our honored guest all the way from the heartland of Israel in the land of Judea and Samaria. He has an awesome testimony and some inspirational messages to give us straight from the heart of Israel.
Okay, guys, let's see. We usually don't start this way, but since I'm in the home state, we should give a little background. My dad was managed Federal Express. He was one of the big Federal Express managers, Nashville hub, and was down in Florida a lot. My mom was a Mary Kay sales director. So they were just typical American hometown Franklin style folks. And boy, the journey started getting really interesting for them when they felt like God say, you're not gonna tell me how many children. I'm gonna give you how many children you wanna have, and that's why the big family, I'm one of 11. They said, okay, God, you wanna give us all the children we wanna have? I mean, so they opened up and said, God, whatever, how many children you want us to have, we'll have that amount of children. So we ended up with 11 children. And all the friends thought they were losing it. And I'll tell you, it's the best thing in the world. Best friends, we all love each other to death. It's the biggest, happiest family I've ever met. But just incredible. And so mom and dad, they thought, well, corporate America, the rat race, the busyness, it's not like the best home environment, right? Like, you're gonna raise 11 children in this rat race America. And so mom and dad thought, man, we really wanna like sow into our children. And so here in Middle Tennessee, dad left FedEx, mom left Mary Kay. And what are you gonna do with a bunch of children? How are you gonna bring, and there's 7 of us, brothers, 4 sisters. So dad's like, I got an army of boys, so what can I do? So we, down south toward Jackson, there's this little Amish community that, now the story's getting wild. There's this little Amish community down towards Jackson called Lobelville. You ever see the Lobelville exit there? So we lived there, moved from Franklin area, moved down to Lobelville. There's an Amish community there. We were like the black sheep of the black sheep. Because we moved in an Amish community. You guys know about the Amish. The Amish are very secluded. Like they're not, if you're not like them, you're very different. And so in the middle of this Amish community for 7 years, we lived no electricity, off the grid, a family, just incredible time. Most of you guys are like, incredible? Yeah. We loved every second of it. We'd still be there today. It was just incredible life. Like all the busyness and all the craziness, and you just have a family, you're just together, everything slows down. The iPhones, the TV, it's all gone, right? So it was 7 years of us there, and the whole time of this journey, we just loved Israel, always. Even in our living room, I can always remember there's a Israeli flag, and some of you guys know the menorah of Israel. Some of you guys may have one of those. So we just loved Israel. Our family, grandparents, everybody loved Israel. And so at some point we were just thinking, man, we've got to go. Like you guys probably want to go to Israel, and some of you guys have been. We made that first trip. My dad went over, and we wanted to do something more. We're farming, living off the land. We used to sell. Some of you guys ever go over to Leaper's Fork in downtown or out of Franklin, Leaper's Fork. There's the Puckett's Grocery. Anybody ever been over there? Mm-hmm. So you may remember this big family that sold produce over there. You remember anybody? That was us. Anybody buy produce from us?
Wow.
No? So we used to set up there. Andy Marshall, I don't know if anybody knows him, Puckett's. He went to school with Dad. They're big buddies, and he said, let's do something together. So we'd sell produce at Puckett's, and it was a big community event. It was just so that was the build up, and we said, all right, we're going to go to Israel. And my dad went, and he met a bunch of farmers. We had no idea how we were going to serve in Israel. We just were really open about what we would do. We just knew we wanted to serve and bless the people of Israel. And Dad came back from his scout trip to see how we could be a blessing to Israel. He met all these farmers, and tonight I didn't bring my Bible with me. Somebody can I use your Bible? This would be great, because you guys are going to be blown away. Let's see. Thanks. We're going to go, let's see, Jeremiah 31. Okay. This guy, a Jewish man. You know what? There's not too many Jewish folks around Nashville. There's very, very few. So here we are. We just loving Israel like crazy. And Dad goes. He meets this Jewish guy. And he opens his Bible. This is a an Orthodox Jewish guy, and he opens his Bible, Jeremiah 31, verse 5, and it says, "Again you will plant vineyards on the hills of Samaria. The farmers will plant them and enjoy their fruit." And the farmer goes on to tell Dad that he left everything he did, same story almost, and because of this word, and he moved from the coastline, some of you guys know the map of Israel, and he moved out to the mountains of Samaria, because the Bible said that you were going to plant vineyards in the mountains of Samaria. Did you guys ever know this verse was there? It's kind of wild, right? Like the Bible has a verse that says you're going to plant vineyards in the mountains of Samaria. I mean, it's like, you put that in context for us today, it's like, and you're going to go out in the hills of Tennessee and plant corn. I mean, for the Bible to say it, it's kind of like, this is kind of interesting. Okay, so it says you're going to plant vineyards again in the mountains of Samaria. So Samaria is actually a geographical location that the prophet here is describing, and when this day comes, it's like a sign. That's why I'm excited about this, because it's not like planting corn in Tennessee. It's much different. You know, when the Bible says it, it's one thing, but then it's also a sign of the times we're living in. Because when the prophet says that this is going to happen, if you look into the context of what he's surrounding is, there's a time of destruction going to happen, right? And then there's a time of restoration that's going to happen in Israel. So hold on to that for a second, because we're going to get a lot deeper into that. You guys can feel free to raise your hand, ask questions, all that. Back to the beginnings. We started, our family moved from Tennessee. We loaded the truck. Instead of moving to Beverly, we moved to Israel.
You can't get there on a truck.
No. First flight I've ever had in my life. Never hardly been out of Tennessee. You know, one of those kind of homegrown families. And you think my accent maybe a little bit, I mean, you guys are all in the same boat. We're all Tennesseans together. I don't even know if y'all would have been able to. We were like the backwoods Tennessee, you know, farming family, loaded up, like literally the Beverly Hills going out, right? And so we made it to Israel, and we just began serving. The people there never met a Christian. It's not, there's just no Christians. The Judea, Samaria region, what the world calls the West Bank, you guys know that, is an area that's just nobody goes. Well, for one, the media tells everybody it's too dangerous and you shouldn't go there. One thing, I don't know if you guys learned this yet, but if the media says something, you could just basically chuck it. It's not. it's just, that's our world today. So our family started serving there, and it was just our family. We felt like we were called to do this. We were going to go serve the people of Israel. Now we had this education in farming. We learned from the Amish, and neat note, just practical. You may wonder sometimes why God's got you doing something. Just maybe this is a little encouragement. We had no idea why God would send us to an Amish community. That's like the strangest thing you could possibly do, living in America and all the niceties and all this. Why would we go to you know, the people around us, the Amish culture and the Israeli culture, the religious culture, very similar. Even to the point, most of the guys around us must have been Jewish background. The names are all the same. Levies and Glicks and all these Jewish names, literally in the Amish community. So all this training, we're like, okay, you know, we go into Israel, we start the work, and God had just prepared us for that you know, separate kind of people. I mean, that's really what our training was. So we go into Israel, farming, used to dealing with a separate, you know, group of people not unlike ourselves, right? The Amish would speak even, you know, Pennsylvania Dutch. We were clueless most of the time of what was going on. So we move into Israel, same story. So we're ready for that, right? And so we come in and we're like, thank God, right? We could be planting tomatoes in Tennessee. The Bible never talks about planting tomatoes in Tennessee. We've got some holy work to do. Like literally, it's incredible that we could be a part of something that was so huge that the prophets 3,500 years ago would prophesy that the mountains of Israel would shoot forth their branches. Amos 9 says they're going to shoot forth their branches for the people are coming home. There's countless prophecies. There's a rabbi, Rabbi Abba, was a rabbi about 100 years after Jesus. He said, there's no more manifest sign than when the mountains of Israel shoot forth their branches. This is the time of the Messiah. Like this is like Jewish in its core, its depth, is that when you see, it's like just like the disciples, when they saw Jesus, how'd they know he was the Messiah? They said that it says, right? He fulfilled every word that was spoken, right? So in Jewish context, you're looking at something, you gotta know, Why? How come it's fulfilling, right? So when a Jewish person sees Jeremiah 31 and Amos 9, and all these verses, I mean, it's full. I don't have my Bible that's marked. I went through my Bible and marked them all. Countless. I mean, it's just over and over and over again. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Joel, I mean, everything, Amos, they're loaded with these prophecies concerning Israel's restoration. And when you note it, it's all about the vineyards. It's all about the land coming back to life. You're going to see a lot about. Let's go to Joel. This is too good. Joel 2. You know, a lot of people. I don't know if they get this straight too. A lot of people think that Israel's about to go through another. Let me find Joel here real quick. Timeline for you guys real quick. A lot of people think that Israel's about to go into a time of destruction. Just their end time theological, whatever it is. But I want to just go through this really quickly. Because how did the disciples know that Jesus was Messiah? Because he fulfilled everything that Jesus said, right? So, one good way of knowing where we're at is by looking at the times, where are we at, what's happening, what's actually happening. And you can look at it in Joel 2. My Bible's got this all marked out. In Joel 2, it talks about the destruction of Israel. And most people think that that's like going to happen again. Well, I just want to look at it in context. The Joel, he talks about before the dreams and the visions and all this. Actually, it's probably in Joel 1. He says, it's the part about, Joel 1:11. Despair, you farmers, wail, you vine growers, grieve for the wheat and the barley, because the harvest of the field is destroyed, the vine is dried up, the fig tree is withered, the pomegranate, the palm tree, the apple tree, all the trees of the field are dried up. Surely the people's joy is withered away. Okay, so this is, Joel 1 is like starting out. The destruction of Israel is coming. This is going to be a really hard time. And even Jesus, I'll tell you this, in John, did you guys see that withered fig tree? Mm-hmm. Did you ever wonder what in the world that story was all about? The withered fig tree, Jesus, it's like, doesn't it make any sense?
They have any fruit and need cursed.
Right, but does that make any sense? Why would you curse a fig tree? It wasn't even, it says it right there, it's not even the season for figs. It's much deeper. It has to do with the nation of Israel, I believe. The rebirth of the nation of Israel. When you see this budding, this blossoming of the nation, know, that's what he says, know that this is the time, right? All these things, he's talking about the restoration of Israel. This is like a wake-up moment. When you see, he's telling this, when you see the restoration of Israel, wake up. Big things are happening. Okay, so I'm setting the stage here. What is happening in Israel right now? Is it withering? Is all the trees dying? Are all the farmers wailing? You guys with me? Is this what's happening? No. As a matter of fact, there's been 2,000 years of literally this, and this is where I talk to a lot of Christians. I tell them, we don't have to keep cursing Israel. Literally, that's what we've done. And it's been it's literally 2,000 years of just curses and pogroms and annihilation, Holocaust, one thing after the other. This has been the story of Israel for 2,000 years. And they're still here. They still survived. And now we're living in a pretty incredible generation. I hope you guys are tracking with me. The rebirth of Israel in 1948 was nothing more than a complete miracle. Millions, like 50 million Arabs and their surrounding nations attacked 600,000 Jews. And who wins?
6 days.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was the Six-Day War in 1967. But even before that, you talk about an it's only God. You're talking about the same as the Joshua and the sun standing still. And we're living in times, if the Bible's be written today, somebody would need to be writing this down. Like literally, we're living in times, and that's what I want to encourage you guys tonight is that the nation of Israel is still the same old nation of Israel that we read about every day in our Bibles. Like literally, this nation, it's a God thing. Like We don't. It's not just something in the past. And so I always love to bring us up to date that literally the nation of Israel, it's a living testimony. Why does Israel exist? It's pretty clear in the Bible that God chose Israel to make his name known throughout the earth. I mean, that's why the story of Israel exists. God chose the people of Israel. You read the whole Old Testament, it's about God's choosing of the people of Israel so that his name would be known around the world. Well, this is literally what's happening. And so now, God still hasn't changed his mind about that, by the way. Today, well, what do we see? Against all odds, Israel comes back as a nation in 1948. 1967, on, again, incredible deliverance. God just literally knocks the enemies out and brings Israel not only into what they had, but into the Judea, Samaria, Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria areas. So we have an incredible miracle that takes place there, and God is still sustaining Israel. I'm telling you, it's the neighbors haven't changed. They've wanted to annihilate Israel every day since Israel's existence. And God is sustaining his people, and there's something else that's happening on the main stage. Every nation in the world, you guys think about this, every nation in the world is just looking at Israel more than any other country in the world. Why? It makes zero sense that the entire world, there's not a report, there's more reporters in Israel from countries around the world than any other nation in the world. They're just like locked in. Does that make any sense? It makes zero sense unless you have a biblical view of what's happening in the world today. And what's happening? I believe wholeheartedly that God's setting the stage for the time of desolation to end. Go to Amos 9. The time of desolation to end. And we're talking about the time of restoration. It started. It has started. There's no doubt. I've spent the last 18 years of my life in Israel, working in the mountains of Israel, and I just encourage you guys, after tonight, go back and start reading Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, all the prophets. Just underline it when you see mountains of Israel or something like that, and then think, that's a real place, and it's in Israel, and it's the things that were written here are actually coming about right now as it was foretold. Literally, it's happening this way. Let's read this. And I will bring my people back from exile. Well, is that happening? Yeah, that's happening big time. I mean, we got, 2,000 Jews coming back from the Ukraine right now, settling back into Israel, making Aliyah, and somewhere around 20,000 Ukrainians. I mean, the whole world is coming into Israel, it seems like, Thousands of people make Aliyah. Their Aliyah translated is you guys know the word Aliyah? Aliyah is...
Their pilgrimage, or their...
Well, it's making, bringing their citizenship, going to Israel and claiming their citizenship. All right, so that's happening. They will, and here it is again. What in the world is this doing here? They will plant vineyards? Dude, why? What? You're a prophet. Why would you say something like this? I mean, these are not just, anybody's. These are the prophets that wrote the word of God down. I could get them saying, you're going to bring back the people of Israel. Okay, and then before that, you're going to rebuild the cities. That makes sense, but you're going to plant vineyards. Again, it's kind of out of place in our context. In the Israeli context, it's completely makes sense, completely, because it's a sign of the times. They're looking for signs, right? Even Jesus talked about that. They're looking for a sign. They're looking for signs of what is happening. Planting vineyards. They will make gardens and eat their fruit. I will plant them, and then God says, I will plant them in their own land, never again to be uprooted from the land I've given them. You want a little politics real quick? I work a lot in politics in Israel, and actually in the U.S. A little bit of good news for you guys. I'll tell you a quick story. Tennessee right now has the strongest, you guys know about BDS? BDS is boycott, divestment, and sanctions. There's a Israel-hating world out there that boycotts, divests, and sanctions against Israel. So we've done a lot of work, and the state of Tennessee right now has the strongest anti-BDS laws in the entire union.
Yeah.
And that was just passed. My father introduced the bill here, and it just passed last week. So it's fresh off the press. Tennessee is now the most, let me tell you why it's significant. Tennessee is now the most Israel supporting state in the Union based on the anti BDS, because BDS is becoming a huge thing in the anti-Israel world. Because how do you get somebody the best, right? Well, you turn the tap off, right? You take the funds away. You take business away. So that's what these guys were doing. Anti BDS was people to boycott. And what were they boycotting? They're boycotting our neighborhood, Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria. So Tennessee just put the laws in place now. Just last week, it was all voted in, boom, 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 that this was inappropriate, that no one should ever boycott and divest from Israel, that we support Israel and we support the businesses of Israel. And if you choose, a Tennessean, if you would choose to boycott and divest Israel, well, there's a price to pay, and you'll have heavy fees, actually. You're not allowed to boycott Israel. Let me tell you, God says, bless Israel, and you'll be blessed. I think Tennessee's got some good things coming. So that's big news for you guys, Tennesseans.
Yeah, it is.
My father introduced the bill a couple months ago, so it's been a process of working through the bill. 30 other states have anti-BDS laws. Tennessee outshined them all last week. So this is big. I will plant them in the land, and they will never be uprooted again. This is a really big key, because when God brings back the people of Israel, his promise is that he's not going to uproot them again. Politically, every government in the world, especially our government right now, believes in a thing called a two-state solution. You guys ever heard about this? The two-state solution, to me, when the world, just remember this. What do you think about when you hear solution? Anybody?
The answer.
It's usually bad.
Usually really bad, especially when it comes from government. Yeah, governments and solutions.
I'm here to help.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think of worse. Think about solutions and connected to Jews. Anybody?
As in
Final.
Germany, as in
Final
Germany.
solution. Anytime the world comes up with a solution for the Jews, it's going to end horrifically. I mean, that's just a fact. The world has been consumed with this idea of finding this Jewish problem, right? Like, this has been like a anti-God, anti-Jews, like it's all like this one box. Corrie ten Boom said, if you love God, if you love God, you love his people. Like Corrie ten Boom is so zealous. Like, it's like an outpouring of our faith when we love the Jewish people based on our, hey, come on in, welcome.
Thank you.
So this is like an outpouring of our faith. It's like a test of our faith, really, if we love the Jewish people. Very, very significant that the Jewish people are coming back, being rooted in the land, and they're not going to be pulled up. But what's the attack against Israel? From every nation, the attack is to pull Jews. The solution is, the solution is a two-state. And where is that two-state? You guys probably are not aware of this. The two-state is to pull Jews out of where? Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria. And what do? They made a political cover of that, because they know there's way too many Christians in the world that understand that Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria is obviously Jewish. I mean, Judea. Can't get, yeah, I mean, it's like America, we're Americans and we live in America. Chinese live in China. Jews live in Judea, and it's been called Judea for thousands of years, and you can't erase that. But yet, so what's the answer? Change the name. Right? Romans did it. Romans wiped everything clean, changed the name to Philistia, right? To try to over the Philistines, to try to Palestine after the Philistines, to really smear it in, right? So now our modern world is doing the same thing the Romans did to try to rename, wipe the history away. Talk about America, we've got our problems enough, trying to wipe out history, right? That's a pretty common situation here. Israel, big time. American influence, Western influence, everybody's trying to erase the biblical history of Israel, erase the fact that Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria, which is like hundreds of times all over our Bible, is now called the West Bank. You're never going to hear anybody in the media say anything about Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria as like a property. It's called the West Bank now, across the board. West Bank, politics, news, everywhere, West Bank. This is how they can get it under our nose. They can deceive billions of Christians into thinking that, oh, we can create a two-state. And guess who gets the Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria? The hostile, anti-Israel, Islamist state is going to live right next to Israel and rocket, Israel constantly like they do in Gaza. Okay, enough of the politics, right? But the promise is that God says he's going to plant them in the land. They're no longer going to be pulled up. Yeah. This is what I believe this is the point we're at right now. The world is attacking Israel with every bit of ounce of, pressure it can to, politically, all these different things, boycotts and all these things, but yet Israel's still there. And all these different administrations that have come and gone and all these things have happened, Israel's still there. And all the anti-Judea, Samaria things, Israel's still there. And not only that, when we first started our organization, helping build the farms, because we really felt like this is so biblically profound, Isaiah 61:5, this is where we'll go next. Isaiah 61:5. So it's so biblically profound. Like we have to grow these farms. When we started, it was a completely new thing. All these the settlement movement. You guys heard about settlements in Judea and Samaria. These are Jewish pioneers that are going and settling the land. That they're really only doing it because it's written in the Bible that they would go and settle these lands. That's what Isaiah 61:5 says. This is where you guys come in. It says strangers. Okay, if you're in Israel, I'll tell you, as a Tennessean, they look at us. We're pretty strange, especially when we open our mouths. That's the big part. And especially if you're like me and you speak Hebrew, and then you open your mouth, then you're really strange. So like a Hebrew with a southern accent. Like this is great. All right, so strangers will shepherd your flocks, foreigners, yeah, we're strange and foreign, will work your fields and vineyards. Fascinating. Vineyard shows up every time. You're like, what is this? They'll shepherd your flocks and work your fields, your vineyards. And it goes on to lots more in this chapter. But the big point, and then before that, they'll rebuild the ancient ruins, restore the places long devastated. Long devastated. This is just all these prophecies of what we're seeing happening in Israel are all, it's going to be devastated for a long time, then it's going to come back to life. What are we seeing right now?
Coming back to life.
That's exactly right. It's been devastated for a long time, and now it's coming back to life. This should make us like jump up and down, because here's the big reason. If Israel's purpose in the world is to declare God as God, then what is this doing right now? It's declaring God's God, because when God said all these words, the time of desolation over the land of Israel, the restoration, God, these are all promises from God that would happen. When that happens, it's the biggest. We talk about evangelism. What's the biggest way to declare God's God? Is to say his word is true, right? So when the words of God are confirmed and are happening, then it says, well, what can the world say against that? God must be God. Because now, all the words that he spoke, I mean, this is literally what is happening, because the nation of Israel their existence declares that God is God, because he spoke it, and now it's happening. I think that this is in our day, this is the biggest thing that's happening in the world, in my opinion. And this is also why every nation in the world is attacking it furiously. There cannot be, in a secular world, a Jewish sovereign state in the biblical borders that God spoke about it, because they're at war with this idea. Because what are they also at war with? They're at war with God. They're at war against God and God's words. So if this is to bring us all up to date, the big war is, because there's a God. That's what separates us from the rest of the world and the rest of the people. We believe in God. If we believe in God, we believe in his words. What is everybody else in the world that doesn't believe in God and his words? What are they fighting against? They're fighting against the essence of God's character, who he is and what he said he's going to do. And this is literally the story of Israel. This is where we're at in Israel right now. It's this culmination of this huge battle that's taking place politically, all these different things, like the whole BDS thing where the whole world is trying to attack and pull Israel down. Well, literally, It's those little things that are making a huge difference. And now we're seeing that reverse. I'll tell you a few projects that we got going. I came to my brother Nate the other day. Remember, I got a brother for everything. Tell him, hey, you know, we've been working a lot with the farmers. We planted, literally when we first started, there was about 10 acres of vineyards in the whole mountains of Samaria region, which, remember, we read that prophecy, mountains of Israel are going to shoot forth their branches. Ezekiel talked about that, and Isaiah and Joel, all these prophecies talk about the vineyards coming back. After about 12 years of working there, there's about 500 acres now. So I'm not talking about, literally, we've planted thousands and thousands of vineyards all over the mountains of Samaria. Literally, it looks like some kind of like, you know, if anybody seen vineyards, you know, covering mountains like Colorado, or, you know, even around here or in California, you know, you just see these massive, the mountains literally are just covered in vines now. And this is, it's literally spoken by the prophet that this would happen, and now it's coming to pass. So I talked to my brother. I said, you know, we've planted, you know, thousands and thousands of vines. I said, I really think that we need to start doing forestry, because also prophecies. We don't have enough time to read all of the prophets today, but they're so consumed with the idea of the restoration of Israel and the greening of Israel. There's prophecies about what was desolate's coming back to life. It'll be like the Garden of Eden. Talks about that. So we said we really got to start forestry. So you know, we're farm boys. We don't know anything about planting trees. We know a lot about, you know, crops and these kind of things. You know, you make a mistake and your grandchildren, you know, Dad, you shouldn't have done that. You know, a tomato, you fix it the next year. So we're like, man, we're gotta do some research, figure out what to do. Think about sending them.
Don't plant them too deep.
yeah, true.
We're master gardeners.
Are you?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Don't plant them too deep.
So we started thinking about, okay, how do we do this with trees, and what are we going to do, and maybe we get some. There's not really in the Middle East. There's not like a lot of education about trees. There's just no trees, and so we thought we'll go to Europe or somewhere close by that we could get some education. Well, we're sitting down. We have a big volunteer group coming in to help with the big project, and this guy steps in and like, hey, you know, we get introductions, and he said, so what do you do? And he said, well, he didn't know anything about our forestry project and stuff, and he says, I'm America's forester. Like he's like he's America's like guy.
Oh my
I was like, you got to be kidding me. I said, what's going on here? Did you know, like, well, you couldn't have known, because I only talked to my brother Nate, and this is all that's happened. And he goes, what's going on? We said, we want to bring back the indigenous, ancient, you know, forest of Israel, which is talked about all over the Bible. The Israel is like the most beautiful. You look at like Josephus and different writings. It says before the Roman destruction of Israel, it says even the lazy man was compelled to farm it. Like, he said it was the most vibrant, incredibly like just fertile lands. And so we're talking with him. We said, you know, we've got to bring this back. Like, this is part of our calling, is to help Israel to really revive itself. And he's like, oh man. So this guy, he's our forester now. The crazy story. How he comes in and now
Where's
he's
he from?
Georgia. So he's
yeah.
yeah,
Because we have a tree crazy guy up in White House, Tennessee.
yeah.
He just loves, I mean, he's got his own arboreta on his property.
That's incredible. So this guy's like and because he's like America's tree guy, he knows tree guys all over the world, and he's not only licensed for America, he's licensed for forestry all over the world. And so our project just fell into his lap, and he says, this is my project, don't let anybody else touch it, I'm on it. And so we've started planting trees. We planted thousands of trees all over the Samaria, Judea area, which also is very strengthening to the communities, one, because that support, it shows. When you plant a tree, you're not just, like we read earlier, you're not going somewhere tomorrow. You're rooted in the land, not to be pulled up again, like Amos talks about. So we started joining communities all throughout Judea and Samaria, joining them and putting a ring around them, because the situation it's like salt and pepper. There's Arab communities, which are hostile Islamic communities that really would want to, end goal is to push the Jews into the sea. Like the way everybody knows that Iran is basically in the back door. This is their goal, right? When we come in, and we put a forest around that. For one, it's a protector to put these Jewish communities in. And I tell you what, for a Christian to come in and join the Jewish people and protecting the Jewish people is a huge thing. When have they ever had Christian support? I mean, it just doesn't. Historically, ones and twos, Corey Ten Booms and these kind of people, it's small groups of people have been supportive. But when you have hundreds of people, we bring hundreds of volunteers. These groups are huge groups. They come in. Tell you what, every person we see, every time we're on a project, it's without fail, Jewish people come in, they're like, what is this? What is going on? And we tell them, we're just here to bless you guys and support the work, and we just love that you've come back home, and we want to see you strong here in the land. And they a lot of times they'll just weep, or they'll just say, the main response is, it's Mashiach time, which is, it's Messiah time. They say, when the nations come, there's prophecies all over again, talk about when the nations come in and help to rebuild Israel, it's also a sign of the end. Like when the nations are not a threat and annihilating factor anymore, when the nations actually, it's like a repentance of it on our side. And who's the one who destroyed Israel to start with? Well, unfortunately, it wasn't Jews. It was a lot of the nations. So as the nations, now look at this opportunity we have. Like everything it's flipping right now. It's all flipping from destruction and sin and all these things that have happened for the last 2,000 years. Right now, it's coming into a redemption, a restoration. And now God's giving us the opportunity to actually be a part of it. The ones that brought that destruction, the nations, now can come in and be a part of this revival, this restoration of the literal physical land of Israel. So I think that's a. I could open it up for questions. I've rattled on for a while now, but if anybody has questions or comments or thoughts, we could open it up and just chat a little bit.
Well, I think that you guys know that I've told you many times, I've said something about the green areas in Israel.
Yeah.
Is where this is a Jewish area.
Yeah.
The green areas are where there's regrowth, where they're really focusing, and those are the areas that are thriving. But and there are things like apple orchards not apple, but it was bananas.
Yeah, the Golan Heights everywhere. Yeah.
But
everything's in Israel. Bananas.
Yeah.
No, literally, it's the only place where in the Galilee you have bananas, and then 5 miles away on the top of the mountains you have apples. I mean, what in the world?
Yeah, just orchards everywhere and growth.
Those two don't go together normally.
But we had gone, and I think we told you, in a bulletproof bus up to where did we go, Steve? What was the name?
On the Mount of Blessing.
Mountain.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was the Mount of...
Gearsum and all that.
Yeah.
Yes, so we went up there, and halfway there's a stopping point, and the Israeli soldiers met us up there. So they were protecting us halfway down the mountain as we went to the top. It was amazing, but everywhere you looked, it was barren.
Yeah.
It was ugly. You could see for miles and miles on one side, and it was just nothing. It was just yuck. And then the next place we go is Hayuel, and I was like, oh my goodness, look at all the green, look at all the green.
When we first moved there was not even birds. It was literally that desolate. When we first came into that area,
Wow.
I mean, planting 500 acres of vineyards, I mean, literally it changes, you master gardeners, it changes the ecosystem. It changes the literal, you put roots in the ground. And this is what's happening in Israel, is that, and then what happens after that root structure goes in the ground is, well, the one that stops the erosion. We estimate over the last 2,000 years, we've had about 14 feet of erosion off the mountains of Israel. We had friends that they were putting a big factory down in the valleys. Went 150 feet just through topsoil. Because
oh my God. And you want to just scoop it up and take it back?
Yeah, take it back to the mountains. Literally, this is how
good soil.
Huge. But I don't think there's any more desolate place in the world that's experienced. Is there anywhere in the world that has experienced the Garden of Eden? I mean, this should be a tropical. Israel's like the Mediterranean. I mean, it's coming back. It's in a process. But you're talking about a desert Before 1948, when the Jews came back, you're talking about, and this is really interesting. You guys know Mark Twain. He went and, what was it, 1867, I believe. He was there, and he told the world, you can read his book, he says, this is the most desolate, godforsaken land. The other day he said something like, you know, he's real witty and anti-God and everything else, but he says, now I can see, you know, nobody else would want it, that's why God took it, basically, about
well,
Israel.
The land between out west,
Yeah.
going to the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, it's
Miles and miles of nothing, maybe a shack every once in a while. And
Yeah.
It's like, and we fought the Indians for this.
right. Yeah.
I mean,
well, it
that
has.
was my feelings at the
Yeah.
time going through there because
Yeah.
they still had some Indians around there. They had
Yeah.
little Indian
Yeah.
shops here and there along the road and whatnot.
Yeah,
But
we haven't managed out there
why
well
did
either.
Why did we take this land? These people, there's nothing here. It's
Right.
nothing.
Right.
Of course, if you're used to green like Tennessee green, it's like
Yeah. Yeah.
but you know, there's areas like that in its own country.
There's another fun story. You guys know Absalom when he gets caught, his hair in the tree. It says in that passage, wasn't Samuel or whatever it is, talks about Kings. Talks about that the Forest of Samaria, this happened in Samaria just down where you guys visited. The Forest of Samaria were so thick, more people were lost to the forest than the battle. Now that's a thick forest. You talk about, that's what surrounded that in the time of David. That's how these mountains looked. And today, and all of this, I mean, the destruction, we don't like to talk about destruction, but literally this is what declared God was God. He said it would happen, and it happened. Like Mark Twain, he told the world that it's desolate, and you want to know what happened immediately after Mark Twain made that statement? I mean, he's the most famous guy in the world. Basically, I don't think there was anybody else that topped him at the time. He writes to the world that, and again, why is he even talking about Israel? I mean, it's a little godforsaken desert land in the Middle East. Why would Mark Twain, of all people, need to go to Israel and travel all over the land? Like, what's he doing that for? And tell the world that it's desolate? I mean, what kind of job would that be? Why can't he go somewhere? I mean, there's plenty of other places to go to talk to the world about. But Mark Twain goes to Israel, travels the width and breadth of it, and sends a whole report back, and then goes, his book, Innocents Abroad, goes to the world. Why? Well, that was the bookend. Immediately after 1867, whatever it was, what happens? Jews start to come back. That's the beginning of the Jewish return. I mean, there's always been Jews there, but it's very small and very hard, communities, the survival there. Jews start to come back immediately after Mark Twain makes that mark. So it's like you have times, right? God's all about times and seasons and how things work. Literally, Mark Twain says that, the book's closed. Desolation is over, and the people of Israel start to come back. They start to build. And then everything starts to come back. And literally today, this is the moment. I mean, we should be thrilled about, like, to understand that literally God is alive and well. He's moving, and Israel is just like the stage where God's trying to say, "Wake up, world! You should note that I'm doing this in Israel, and it's so that my name can be glorified." That's what God has been. This was his intent from the beginning, was to make his name known in the world. It always baffles me, though, that so many people aren't connecting it. They're not connecting that Israel's a miracle. They think Israel's a problem, and they need a solution, not recognizing that this is God wanting to save the world. This is God wanting to make his name known. It's not a problem. This is the best thing that ever happened in human history, is Israel, the creation of this state of Israel, this return, this place that God is really making his name known to the world. So I grew up and been there, and so I may be slightly passionate about the place.
And I'll add to that, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
It's the only nation in Earth history that has been totally removed and totally come back, and it's definitely the only one that has had a language.
Yeah, dead.
And then the language become dead, and then the language come back.
Yeah. And the only place that a Tennessean would go and learn that language. There's a lot of miracles in place here. Any other questions, guys?
I'll have a shameless plug, though.
Yeah.
I bought some of those trees.
Yeah, fantastic. We've been planting trees like crazy. I'll tell you, there's one other thing. because the erosion and all the craziness has been so severe there, we've come in and we've brought these water boxes, these fabulous little systems. They collect water naturally. So every tree that we plant, we put this little water box around it. It works off of condensation and all kinds, everything. It just collects, it can keep water on a tree, just naturally, no gizmo about it. It's just natural, working process. We keep water in these trees, and so that's what we're doing. We're putting these water systems, planting these trees, a whole big process, and we're doing literally thousands of them now. And this is how we're turning that desolation around. Very ingenuitive, really a creation to make this work. Yeah, so there's a documentary coming out. You guys should be watching out for it. We've got a documentary coming out April 10th on this whole Greening Israel project. It's incredible. I'm so stoked about this project. We're hoping to plant about 20,000 trees a year. After right now we're in the rest year. I don't know if you guys know that. It's called the Shemitah year. So we're in a rest year right now, the 7th year. Yep. Because Israel's just a biblical place, isn't it? Who has these rules? I mean, it's well, the Bible talks about the rest and all these things. Well, this is what's literally happening in Israel right now. Farmers are resting, the land's lying fallow, all this. So we're not planting right now. No roots going in the ground. Literally, it's a nation that's operating like God said to do it. It's just incredible. It's just hard to get your mind around that it actually exists. An entire nation that's like God's, and they're doing it the way God said you should do it. Let the land rest. All these dynamics. So as soon as the Shemitah, the rest year, is over, we're kicking into high gear. We're gonna be planting thousands and thousands of trees. Yeah.
The way I understand it is, the year before the year of rest, the crops are more abundant.
Yeah, I've seen it firsthand.
Is that right? Wow.
Again, it's another testimony to
it takes
God.
Care of you to the year of rest.
We harvested. According to the Bible, it says you're going to get a threefold harvest before. I have not seen 3, but I've seen 2.5, literally, from the year prior.
Wow.
to that 6th year before the rest year. We had 2.5 times the amount of fruit being harvested off of the trees than the year before.
Wait a minute. That 6th year was a COVID year.
And still did it.
Right?
Yeah, true.
And they couldn't get the volunteers in that they wanted.
Yeah, that's been a mess. Everybody struggled through that.
So you're talking about a 2.5-fold with a COVID year with no volunteers, because they rely heavily on volunteers from all over the world to come help them.
Yeah.
Makes me wonder if that's why they rolled into COVID. That probably hurt Israel.
Yeah. You never know. But yeah, everything's a miracle. God's in control. God's doing it, and we should all take heart that hopefully you guys can be encouraged today that God has not forgotten us.
With what's going on in Ukraine, because the rest of the world is gone crazy.
Yeah. Well, at least it's not just us here, huh? Yeah. Yeah, maybe we could be encouraged that we're not the only ones going crazy in America. The rest of the world's with us. I don't know if that's very encouraging. Yeah. Okay, there's a few, you guys could take these with you. I'll just leave these here. I brought some brochures in. So the front part is just about the volunteer opportunities. So we have tree planting opportunities, harvesting grapes. We'll still do some of that. We also have a men's printing trip. And then on the back, I do a weekly, you guys know about this. We got a proud supporter up here at the Isreal Guys t-shirt. We do a show every week that comes out as just combating the lies. So much anti-Israel stuff just runs rampant. Most of it's just not even true.
Well, now we're having the anti-American.
Yeah. Right, true, yeah.
Feel free to download the app.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And yeah, you go to serveisrael.com, take one of these. We got the Israel Guys in the back, serveisrael.com on the front. We'd love it if you guys want to come serve, bless the people of Israel.
It's our field trip, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, when he says come serve, there are different ones, a 2-week, 4-week, and
Yeah, different trips all year round though. I mean, so it's whenever we on our website serveisrael.com, you'll see a lot of different opportunities. And depending on the season, we're doing different things. But yeah, there's endless amount of work to do.
And then you'll work in the vineyards and work along.
We are doing May 2nd. We're doing, this is our first trip's coming up here. It's more of an introductory trip. But we're going to be, it's just a 2-week quick introductory to like, it's like almost like a tour, but it's like a volunteer tour where you're connecting to each project. So we have tons of projects going on. So it's like a way to get a taste of every project all along the Judea and Samaria area.
Volunteers charcuterie board.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if someone wanted to volunteer, let's say 4 weeks, tell them what they would do.
Yeah. Depending on the season. Depending on the season, right. Our volunteer operations Saturdays are off. That's Isreal. We live right next to a Jewish religious community there. Even the gates of the community, they know how to do it. I'm telling you. I mean, can you imagine Sundays if we just all the gates in their towns closed and everything just stopped? I mean, that'd be amazing, wouldn't it? Talk about getting some rest. You know, we could learn a thing or two, right?
There was the Messiah community in Israel, and did you go to church on Sunday and synagogue on Saturday?
Yeah. Well, actually, most Christians in Israel all do it on Saturday as well. Okay. Yeah. Culturally, everything's Saturday there. Yeah. But yeah, so Saturday's off as a rest day and study day, God day, and then Sunday morning the world wakes up over there. Everything's full speed. There's we'll usually our daily schedule about 7 o'clock. We'll do it, or we're usually in the fields by 7 to 8 time frame. So we get things depending on how many people. It all depends on the trip. Give it a very basic overview because it's always different depending on the season and times. But then we'll go out and work, whether it's planting trees or harvesting, or we've done tons of stuff, building security roads, doing farm watch, where we'll do helping farms with their they got to have somebody watch the sheep or whatever. Like there's just a lot of stuff like that. So whatever the project is for that day, volunteers will be zooming from here to there to there to there. The whole huge network of volunteers will be all over the place. And then sometimes if we're out, we'll pack a lunch out, and then but usually we'll always come back to the home base for nights, and then you do that all week. Just going to this project to that project.
Or is it buildings?
Buildings, yeah. Thank God. It used to be tents. Those were the pioneer days. Yeah. It was tents at one time.
Do they still start Sabbath on
Friday night? Mm-hmm. Yep. Sundown on Friday night. Everything stops.
And then sunset on Saturday.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it ain't all fun and games, because I remember showing that you had a big setback with the fires.
Yeah. Oh boy. You'll see it in the documentary when it comes out. He followed it all amazingly. Oh, okay. But we've got.
Sorry, I didn't mean to spoil it.
Oh, it's not a spoiler. It's great. Had so many because the Arabs there in the area are very hostile to the fact that Jewish people would be living and thriving on the land. So even though the land is open and just it's empty, they don't like the fact that you would be planting trees. So. Beats me, but you're like, wait, these trees would really be good for you too. I'm like, yeah, right. No, but if it's Jewish, it needs to be burned. That's the concept.
So I do have a question just for the viewing audience that are not here that will be seeing this later. Can you describe the area of Judea and Samaria, where if you were looking at a map?
Yeah.
Or whatever?
Okay, so Jerusalem is like the epicenter, right in the middle, right? Judea goes to the south. Samaria goes to the north. And most of your Bible, actually about 85% of your Bible, occurs right in that mountain range. Judea, Samaria, Jerusalem, right in the center.
Can you name some biblical cities
in
Judea and Samaria?
All right, so starting in the south, Hebron, ring a bell? Yeah, that's supposed to be the Palestinian state that the West Bank. Telling you, when you start naming the towns, like you said, it becomes like, what? Like all these towns. Hebron, how about Bethlehem? You guys know that town? Bethlehem, Ephrat, Ephrata, you hear about it in the Psalms. Going up, just following the road, I'm seeing all the towns that go up.
Jericho.
Jericho, right there. There's Shiloh, Bethel, what do they call it? And Shechem. Shechem's all over the Old Testament stories. Just countless places. I mean, they're just covering the whole landscape. Yeah.
Is Nazareth in that group?
Nazareth is farther north.
Closer to Samaria.
It's just north of Samaria, actually,
Okay.
in between Samaria and the Galilee, kind of center Israel. Yeah. That's one of the few towns that's not inside the Judea and Samaria area. But yeah, it's unreal that our world is so far removed from a biblical context of what Israel is, the cities of Israel. So it's time we all get to work.
So I have a personal question.
Yeah,
You said you've been there 17 years?
18 years.
18 years. What's the biggest God, aha, light bulb, come on moment that you've had there?
Or the top three.
Top three.
There you go.
Be careful.
We'll see you. Thanks for coming.
He's gotta go to work.
Thank you for, I just read about the cursing of the fig tree.
Yeah, did you read
I knew it
that?
was in the Old Testament somewhere. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep, that's where it is. Yeah, I was just reading that the other day too. Top aha moments. I think when I realized that God actually, when he says something, he means it. He never change. God's not the one that changes his mind. Like we change our minds about stuff. God doesn't do that. And so or he doesn't forget either. That's a good point. When you read the Bible, doesn't matter where in the book, just wherever it is. If God said it, he didn't change his mind. He just didn't. It never did. So when he chooses Israel, it's like that's a aha moment for a lot of us to really be like, whoa. No, he didn't. He didn't change his mind. And now, I think this really is the biggest aha moment. He talked about replacement theology a little bit. When we realized, because before 1948, before all these miracles, it was easy for us to be like, well, maybe God did forget, right? Because it makes sense. God forgot. It's been 2,000 years. Surely by now he forgot. Israel is desolate. Jerusalem's desolate. The Jewish people are forgotten. They're oppressed. Well, and sadly, most of Christianity came to that conclusion, that God did forget, right? But now that this all is coming back to life, it's like we understand, like God didn't forget. Like literally, this is like the light bulb moment. Literally, I mean, maybe some of you guys right now are like, it's a light bulb moment. If God didn't forget, that changes everything. Like I don't know how we were Christians before, thinking that God did forget. I don't know how that makes you, I don't even know how that works. But literally our theology is that God did forget. But now that all this rebirth, all these things are happening, God didn't forget. And this is like the biggest thing. This is like the most confirming thing to our faith. And so this is the light bulb moments that I've had working in Israel to be like, God, you didn't forget. Like it's really emotional. Like he didn't forget every little word, not even about one vine, one fig, like every little detail he's bringing about in like precision. Like God of the universe is concerned about every little like a vineyard being planted in the mountains of Samaria, a tree being restored to the land, the Jewish people, every single one of them coming back to the land from every part of the nation around. The Word of God talks about the second Exodus happening. I'm telling you guys, we're living in the middle of it. Like what's easier? And they said it would be greater. A lot of people ask me this. They're like, what do you think about the second Exodus? I'm like, just wake up and look at it. What's greater, taking one people group out of one country and bringing them in? I mean, that's what happened in the first Exodus. God brought the Jewish people, great signs and wonders brought them in. But what's going on right now?
They're coming from every
He's not bringing he's bringing a 1 person, 2 person, 3 person, all 9 million that way. That's the creation of Israel. And you think of what's greater, to me, that's a much greater situation that's happening.
And it wasn't too long ago that they had the same thing that's happening now in Ukraine. in Ethiopia, where a bunch of Ethiopians made their aliyah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's happening all over the world. These people groups have begun, and they're still alive. I mean, America is still, there's a lot of Jews that are still here. There's more here than there are in Israel almost. They're about even. But it's going to be a time when all these Jewish people begin to come back to the land of Israel as a fulfillment, literally of the Word of God. Like this, I'm just telling you guys, we're living in amazing times, and we should end on this note: is that keep your eyes on Israel. Like, just look at it, because it's going to confirm your faith as the world goes crazy. And I'm telling you, the world's going to keep going crazy. It's not that's just going to be a fact. But keep looking at Israel, and you're going to be encouraged, because God's not leaving His people. We read the prophecies earlier. They're not going to be pulled up from that land. They're going to be there, because this is the restoration, which you know what leads to. This has a really good ending. I don't know if you guys know this. Like this,
the trumpet?
yeah, I mean this is the restoration of Israel is an incredible event that happens where God literally is saving His people from all over the world. Like this, Israel is the epicenter of this whole move of God, and I'm telling you, we need to have our eyes on Israel. Like this is a huge moment for us to understand this. And so from Tennessee, Nashville, you know, got to keep our eyes. My brother wrote this book, Facing Jerusalem, to keep our, to really know that God's doing things there. And this is going to be a huge encouragement to our daily lives to connect. What is God doing? Keep our eyes focused on Jerusalem. There's one story. The Samaritans. I keep thinking about stories here. I could write a book, I think.
I think you have.
yeah. The Samaritans, what he left the Samaritan village. You guys remember this story? Because he said the Samaritans didn't accept Jesus because he said he had his face toward Jerusalem. Remember the story? Why? Why would they not accept him? Because his face was toward Jerusalem? They didn't accept the fact that Jesus was faced toward Jerusalem. That's what this book's all about. It's like, well, if Jesus' face was set toward Jerusalem, this is a good cue that we also should have our faces set toward Jerusalem. Really, really important note. And the Samaritans didn't. It was like a problem that they had there. So, as from Nashville, look to the east. God's doing big stuff. We gotta keep our faces set in that kingdom vision, that kingdom, and look at the culmination. It's happening. We're living in great times, guys. Don't be discouraged with the current political nightmares.